So welcome back to Third Age Reforged and to another battle replay and to another large and long siege. As I'm sure you can see, we're on a Dwarven map today, but this is a Dwarven map that I have never seen before, and it certainly has the feeling of one of those maps which was sort of lost in the game files that someone found. Just because if you do look at the ceiling, there are some missing textures, but nonetheless, that's not going to be terribly important because the map as a whole does function. There's nothing wrong with it, I would assume, otherwise I wouldn't have been sent this. But it is a rather interesting place, so I would assume that this is another variant of Erebor, because there was an Erebor map in the original Third Age, but it was a very weird settlement, which was actually terrible to defend because it actually got lower the further into the settlement you went, so the attackers could just position themselves on higher ground than the defenders and rain death down upon them, whereas this map is certainly not going to have those problems at the very least. But yeah, very interesting map, and it is going to be 3 Dwarven factions on the defence today, 1 Erebor and 2 Khazad-dûm, I believe, but we'll be going through their armies afterwards. We will instead start with the factions which start off on the outside of what I can only assume is the Lonely Mountain. There is no settlement of Dale right next to them, but nonetheless we will be seeing the dwarves try to defend their reclaimed home today, and we will start off with the Steward of Dale, who is going to be playing as the Orcs of the Misty Mountain. So just a cursory glance, because this is a very long battle, so I want to get into it as quickly as I possibly can, and we're on 0.96, so nothing overly new in terms of mechanics. There is going to be a catapult, of course, which in a map like this, with choke points and sort of really grindy fights, especially against the dwarves, where their infantry is certainly going to be superior to the infantry of the Misty Mountains, using a war machine like a catapult is going to be a very useful tool to try and break up their defensive lines. The Black Orcs of the Mountains, of course, are another one of those units which, you know, as far as the Misty Mountains go, having a heavy swordsman like this is very, very helpful, because most of the goblin units that make up the main line are certainly not going to be as good in melee as the Black Orcs are. The Black Orcs do find themselves outmatched still against a lot of similar units, other heavy swordsmen, but still it's nice for the Misty Mountains to be able to field something like that. Cave Troll Drummers and Cave Trolls. Cave Trolls in particular are fantastic at cracking through choke points. The dwarves, with how deep the defence may be, might even be able to stop the Cave Trolls from getting through all the way, and even if the Cave Trolls do get through, they'll be very battered and bruised, because being in combat is actually where they are weaker than other trolls. We'll see how well they can do there. If they're used at the right time, they could be a real match winner. Heavy Goblin Crossbows, again, no-brainer to bring them. Very good against armour, fantastic stopping power, going to be useful against the dwarves. Heavy Goblin Spears as well, they are armour-piercing, they may be spearmen, but the armour-piercing will still come in very, very handy. And the General going to be in the Goblin King's bodyguard, and there is probably a couple of hidden units around here as well. Goblin Infantry, Goblin Archers, and the like. Second army we have is Felagund Finrod, or what used to be Lord Finrod Felagund, I assume, and he is going to be playing as the Kingdom of Rune. Another good choice actually against the dwarves, because they have a lot of AP that they can bring to bear. Having a look over on this side, including the Balchoth Tribesmen and the Eastron Crossbowmen. So of course a lot of stopping power, a lot of AP bound up in those 2 units. There may be some hidden units in here as well, the Carmul's units. Both the Shadow Guard and the Shadow Bows would also be good choices. Eastron Clansmen with varying levels of armour upgrades, the unupgraded variant and then the upgraded by 1 level over here, so you can of course upgrade them twice if you have the money to do so. Gamprim and some Dragon's Wrath crossbows. Dragon's Wrath crossbows could be really devastating, but it is going to be difficult to use unless they can get into the settlement and get a clean shot on the dwarves. They can't fire over their own men after all. But we have got the Lope Gamprim as well, good halberdiers. The Inas Rim are actually a unit you don't see an awful lot of, because they are a heavy cavalry unit which is fairly slow because of their armour, but they lack a shield, so it's a very strange unit to try and use, the Inas Rim, but we'll see if they get used a little bit more in 0.97 with tweaks all around to most units. But even so, I don't know if cavalry is really going to be the way to go in this battle anyway. More clansmen, and then of course Flag Rim, armour-piercing line infantry, very, very handy against the dwarves indeed. The third army, going to be Isengard, played by Captain Gervais. Another decent faction against the dwarves, just because their infantry is solid enough, and they do have some armour-piercing options as well. The Uruk-hai Reavers for 1, cheap Axeman, which will get the job done. The Dunlanders are not armour-piercing, they do have a higher attack, but they're going to be outclassed by most dwarven infantry, to be honest. Isengard Ballista and Crossbows, obviously going to be very useful if they can get into the right position. Infantry and Pikes will be able to hold decently well. Both Erebor and Khazad-dûm have their options which will surpass this combination of Isengard, but at the very least numbers, armour, and a little bit more solid than the infantry forces of particularly the Misty Mountains that we've seen so far, and Rune have got a different focus in being armour-piercing. Nazkai, Guards of Orthanc, we've got some Uruk-hai Berserkers as well, good armour-piercing options as well as a tough spear, and also some Trolls of the White Hand, which of course much, much better in melee than the cave trolls we saw earlier. The fourth army, we have Thick Dick, who is going to be playing as Harad. Harad, I would assume, have gone more numbers heavy, which, yes, we have some Haradrim spearmen, so we can see here the very gates of Erebor. Haradrim Archers as well, which aren't going to do a lot of damage, but still, just here for the numbers. Southron Warband, much like the Heavy Goblin Spears, are armor piercing, so they will be useful in that regard. We also have some Southron Pikemen, which again are an armor piercing pike unit, which sounds incredibly OP, but their stats are really woeful. So unless their phalanx remain strong, unless they're in an ideal engagement, they'll get torn apart very quickly. A mix of Serpent Guard and Dismounted Serpent Guard. Down here we have the Champions of Nafarat and the Trollmen of Harad, both very, very good choices against the Dwarves because of their armor piercing. Muhad Berserkers also AP, but of course nowhere near as strong as the Trollmen, but still cheaper. And also some Muhad Beast Hunters and the Demons of the Desert, of course. Demons of the Desert, one of the most devastating sights on the battlefield to behold when they get good shots off. And then the final army we have over here, the final evil army, we have Super Specific 560, who's going to be playing as Angmar. Angmar, of course, another good choice. I would imagine there's Barrow-wights hidden in here. This is 0.96 after all, and Barrow-wights will be incredibly useful for the attackers to use here because of how strong the Dwarven infantry is. But they also have Orc Fellers, so that's good AP options. They have Halberds, which are also AP. Trolls are in there as well. There's some Blackwatch Legion. You can see the skulls poking out. And I would imagine there might be... You can see in there, yeah, you can see the rusted hammers of the Hammer Guard also poking out, which is another very good choice because of how strong they are. And also some Guardians of Khan Doom. So, excuse me. We will now head within Erebor itself. Again, I'm assuming this is Erebor. It certainly has the look. A lone mountain in the middle of everything with that gate as well in particular. So we'll just go through all of the armies all at once, I think, within the interior. So we have Lord Whalecombe, who's going to be playing as the Force of Erebor. We have Eclipse 2500, who is the player who sent me the replay, who's going to be playing as one of the Khazad-dûm armies. And the other Khazad-dûm army is going to be played by Death Eater. So very, very thematic battle, this. Ooh, I should mention that my allergies have not gone away either, so I'm still going to sound disgusting intermittently throughout the replay. Ironfoot Pikes, of course, going to be very, very useful. I don't think any pikemen that the enemy have brought can outright just crush the Ironfoot Pikes. The Uruk-hai Pikes probably around even with the Ironfoot. We also have the 4th Legion Shield Guard, of course, very, very good because they don't suffer the spear malice that other spear units of this type suffer from, which actually makes them better at being line infantry than proper line infantry because spears attack faster. So particularly with the armour upgrade, the 4th Legion, such an efficient unit, a very efficient unit in 0.96, which is one of the reasons why Khazad-dûm are so strong. They will be being changed to be more in line with other spears. They're still very strong in 0.97, but not quite as overpowering as they are in this patch. But Khazad-dûm are going to need some overpowering units considering the opposition that are up against them today. Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm as well. We'll see if they can get into a good position to actually utilise their ammunition. This is the gate over here, so this isn't one massive gate, I was wondering there. Ironfoot Pikes, 4th Legion Shield Guard again, so some 3rd Legion upgraded as well, still very strong of course, and then some Ironfoot Crossbows and stopping power are going to be very, very necessary. Hammers, Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, all of the best Dwarven units. There's some 1st Legion down there as well, so Khazad-dûm's Pikes in particular are going to be incredibly difficult to just bash through, especially with the backup of Reclaimers, Hammers of Gundabad, and all of the strong units from both Erebor and Khazad-dûm. Sons of the Fallen are in there as well. The Obsidian Guard, which is good to see. They're not AP, but they are incredibly tough to kill in melee just because of their huge armour and skill values combined. It's one of the highest defences to try and crack through in melee in the game. You know, it's so difficult to kill them. They don't necessarily deal damage all that quickly, to be honest. Dual wielding units often have that problem. The Harbingers of Castamere do that as well. But the Obsidian Guard are so tanky that they often are worth it in this sort of situation. We of course have the Sons of Durin as well, mighty dwarven shock infantry. Ironfoot Warriors down here as well, of course, armoured up. Axe Guard of Erebor also, and then the Guards of Khazad-dûm, 3 hit points, can't argue with that, so tough to kill. Axe Guard of Erebor, Ironfoot Axe Throwers, so you already get a sense of what's going on here. And then back here we have another layer, Erebor Legionaries, we have the 2nd Legion, 4th Legion, more Erebor Legionaries, Axe Guard, 2nd Legion, 4th Legion, all the Legion, and then some Ironfoot Spears as well. And the Blacklock Engineers, I was wondering when we would see them, that was what I was really looking for, because they, of course, basically Rangers crossed with Crossbowman, everything you could ever want, bound up in one single unit. They could rip through the attackers and could secure victory for the Dwarves in this sort of situation with how choke pointy this particular map is. We shall see. I will make a little cut actually here because I would imagine what the attackers are going to do is wait for all of their armies to be grouped up, because it does look as though they're all going to move down to this gate over here and I don't think there is a way in from over here, so yeah. I will make a cut, and I will rejoin whenever they're either all grouped up or when Harad decides they're going to knock the gate down. So, as we can see, the assault is very much underway, and actually these sections of wall, I didn't actually check this, but I would have assumed they would have been buildings which would have made them indestructible to siege equipment, but I'm actually glad to see that they are not, because this means that we won't just be subject to one single choke point, which I honestly think if the dwarves stacked up all of their infantry on just this single gate, they'd have been able to hold indefinitely, which certainly would have made for great watching. But with 5 potential choke points here, that is most certainly going to be a little bit different. So the Isengard Ballista has had to expend a little bit of its ammunition in actually knocking down these walls, so it's not sort of a complete disaster for the dwarves. They're going to have to defend more choke points here. We can also see that the Uruk-hai crossbows and the Haradrim archers are attempting to shoot within the fortress, but you can see the Haradrim archers are certainly not the most accurate, and there's a lot of shots which are certainly missing their mark. But, you know, the Dwarven infantry, you know, there's a couple of them that have died off, but shields and armour, they're not going to be too concerned with the Haradrim archers just loosing a few arrows into their ranks, as long as they reform. They certainly want their shields pointed towards the enemy. But yeah, I mean, one thing that the dwarves can do very, very well, of course, is hold choke points, and even if there are multiple choke points like this, they certainly have the capabilities to hold on to this first layer of the defence for quite some time. They've got a lot of pikes, they've got a lot of heavily armoured infantry, and they've got proper support coming in from their ranged units. So Ironfoot axe throwers, orc hunters, Khazad-dûm reclaimers, Ironfoot crossbows, all of the sort of units which are going to deal tremendous damage to the attackers as well. So I can certainly see why the attackers are trying to utilise their ranged units as efficiently as they possibly can. But it is easier said than done, because they're having to sort of thread the needle through the fortifications, and even if those arrows do hit, the dwarven units are heavily shielded and armoured. So I don't think that Haradrim archers are going to be the answer to their conundrum of trying to take Erebor here. You can also see that as they sort of try to shift their targets, I think they're going after the orc hunters that were there, which they can still target them, but unfortunately for them, all of their arrows really are pinging harmlessly off Erebor's stone walls. So they're trying to shift themselves. I mean, eventually the attackers are going to have to move in. I think they might still be waiting for the Steward of Dale, who's still making his way around here, having started off in the far north of the map. They might as well commit themselves forward now. I mean, it's not as if all 5 armies can move forward at exactly the same time. There simply isn't enough room to accommodate 5 armies moving through all of these choke points. Each one of the attackers can take a single opening, I suppose. But they certainly don't want to just charge on in, because that will be all the excuse the dwarves need to just stack up really harshly on each choke point, and it'll be really hard for the attackers to make much ground quickly. A lot of these units as well, they certainly need to sort of ration out a lot of their units which are really well suited to fighting the dwarves. Like Harad, the trollmen are pretty much ideally suited for fighting the dwarves. But they definitely need to be utilised carefully so the dwarves can't just focus them down with their axe throwers and the like. The orc hunters are being targeted by the Haradrim archers, which is definitely the right choice. Of all the units in Khazad-dûm's roster, if the Haradrim archer is a cheap, low-tier archer from an Evil Man faction, is able to get any substantial kills on a dwarven unit, it's going to be the orc hunters, because they simply don't have the armour that the vast majority of the rest of Khazad-dûm's roster has. Still hear the dwarven drummers banging away in the background here, but certainly a bit of a lull in proceedings. I think they're still trying to sort of poke and prod away at the dwarven defences with their archers. It might be that they want the Misty Mountains to lead the way. I mean, the Misty Mountains certainly have a bit of a reputation for being slightly more disposable than many others, but it is a very impressive looking attacking army as they all gather their forces here. The forces of darkness are at Erebor's gates. Angmar, the Misty Mountains, Harad, Rune. All units which complement one another's strengths actually pretty well. And Isengard, let's not leave them out. But I think I will make a little cut here, because it does look as though the attackers are just going to wait for the Misty Mountains to get here, and they're still a fair ways off, to be honest. Here we go. It looks as though the assault is happening, and Isengard actually the ones leading the way with their Trolls the White Hand in the vanguard, and then also there come the Barrow Whites popping into existence, and the Uruk-hai infantry, the Dunlanders and the Pikes also following them, so a big assault here underway immediately. We'll see if the Trolls of the White Hand can make any substantial gains here immediately. I mean, to be fair, it is only Ironfoot Warriors and 3rd Legion. I say only, that's obviously still very potent dwarven infantry, but No AP troops in close proximity, which would make the business of trying to kill these Trolls of the White Hand off a little bit easier. The Ironfoot Pikes also moving in, so immediately we're going to have a big assault. The Uruk-hai Reavers moving in, that's a ton of units. And 4th Legion blocking the way. They're also going to receive some support from the Axe Guard of Erebor. In come the Pikes, although they should really be swapping these around. Like, the Axemen should be going after the Trolls, the Pikes should not be going after the Trolls. Trolls do a very good job at dealing with Pikemen because of their attack animations and the fact that they can just push aside the phalanx with very little in the way of effort. Forward come another unit of 3rd Legion, though. Here come the Hammers of Gundabad, so immediately the Dwarves were very well prepared to meet a large assault. A lot of pikemen in this initial assault as well. Southron pikemen, Uruk-hai pikemen coming through over here as well. That's a ton of units over here. If there were rangers involved in this, the game would probably crash, honestly. The frame rate wouldn't just drop, it would just crash. What happened to those Trolls of the White Hand? I think did they pull out or did they all die? No, there's no troll. Oh, there is some troll corpses on the ground, I suppose, but they must have pulled out, which is understandable. Not the most ideal engagement. Here comes some Goblin Infantry, just some standard units, so the Misty Mountains on scene now. So a huge fight underway here, as some Axe Throwers from both Dwarven factions getting into position. The Ironfoot Axe Throwers throwing over the heads of their men, which is what they are best at, of course, and they're going to be able to do substantial damage to the pikes that are over there. However, the attackers also responding in kind with their own thrown units. The Baltroth Tribesmen moving in. Javelins, though, their arc of fire, I believe, is not quite as user-friendly in this sort of situation as the Axe Throwers would be. Not to mention that the Dwarven Axe Throwers in 0.96 at the very least are just straight up better. Of course, they will not be AP in 0.97, the Axe Throwers. There will be a clear differentiation between Javelins and Axe Throwers. Here comes the Cave Trolls, though, and there is a gap in this line already that the Trolls have managed to force, so the Dwarves need to respond to this. If they've already committed forward far too many resources to Dwarves to this front line to simply let it fall. So they're going to need to put a stop to this pretty quickly. That's the Isengard Ballista, which is firing into the backs of its own men, I think, which is not great. But also over here you can see that the Dwarves certainly need to commit forward some more men here to hold these front lines. Otherwise, it's going to be a bit of a disaster early on, to be honest with you. It's a huge assault which is happening, but if they were going to abandon their front line this quickly, they needed to not commit forward so many resources to it. But it is good to see that more reinforcements are on the way. There's another unit of 2nd Legion Axe Guard on the way forward. The Obsidian Guard have been committed forward over here as well, so that is a bit of a statement of intent by Erebor in particular, that they are not going to give up this front line without a fight. Already, lots of death happening on the front line, but this is a bit of a disaster here for the defenders. They didn't commit enough units to hold the main gate, and the attackers have managed to pour in now. Heavy Goblin Spears, Uruk-hai Infantry. They're starting to swamp over the defences, which is exactly what you want when you're playing as, particularly the evil factions, when you're on the attack and you have a huge numbers advantage. This is exactly the sort of engagement you want to be seeing. You want chaos. You want to be overwhelming the defences in several positions, even if, these units are not the highest quality. Just a bit of chaos on the front line is exactly what you want. You can see that the Dwarves, technically victory is still a certainty, but I'd imagine that will start to flip if more and more units start to attack into the side here. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, another unit of Khazad-dûm Reclaimers coming forward. 3rd Legion, also in position. They probably need to be committed forward as well, as another unit of Heavy Goblin Spears tries to push their way through the very thin Dwarven front line in this section. So again, the attackers doing the right things. Sons of the Fallen being committed forward as well. You can see that over here, the Dwarven defences are just being overrun. I feel as though the reinforcements weren't quick enough from the Dwarves. We'll see if that ends up really biting them. The Ironfoot Axe Throwers also being targeted by the Uruk-hai crossbows. So again, the attackers are doing all the right things, and the defenders, I feel like, are being a bit too slow on the uptake here. They needed their reinforcements faster than this, and now their front line is looking substantially weaker than it used to. There's still some very strong units on the front line, don't get me wrong, and it still won't be easy for the attackers, but still. Legion Bodyguard have come forward, and they have managed to sort of contain the situation a little bit over here. Meanwhile, Javelins raining into the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers over here. This unit of Reclaimers appears to have whipped out its axes, and now they're going to plod into melee, try and stop the advance of the Heavy Goblin Spears. There's also some Mount Naught Berserkers following them in as well. Another good choice against the Dwarves, just because of their high AP focus. It looks as like already the Dwarves are thinking about pulling back, so the attackers have certainly had the best of this engagement so far, this battle as a whole. I feel as though, again, if they were going to fall back, they should never have committed forward the Sons of the Fallen, the Obsidian Guard, the 2nd Legion Axe Guard. They should have saved what they could. You know, it's either... I feel as though this is, again, a bit of that problem where, like, they commit forward some, but not all. And you're better off committing nothing than just pieces. It never really works out very well when you defend like this. I mean, I hope I'm wrong. I would like to see the Dwarves win this fight, if I'm being perfectly honest, on their home turf. But they're not off to a good start. All of the experience I've built up in Reforged tells me that this was the wrong way to go about the first layer. And you can see that, yeah, the attackers are really just swamping over the Dwarven defences. The Legion Bodyguard is another unit they could have really done with later on in the battle. Yeah, I feel as though as soon as the engagement started to turn on this front line, they should have just pulled back and saved what they could. As it was, rather than committing forward everything that was needed to save the front line, they just committed forward a little bit. And it hasn't really achieved anything, if I'm being honest. Of course, the attackers have had to pay for this ground. They have taken losses of their own, but nowhere near the amount of losses that the defenders needed to be seeing at this point in the battle. Barrow-wights are starting to spaz out all over the place. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers fighting on the front line against the Southron Warband. They'll probably be able to kill the Southron Warband off, but then the rest of the attacking Legion will be ready to go in as well. There's only 26 Obsidian Guard left. I'm not really sure why the Inas Rim tried to push their way through the front line, if I'm being honest with you. Not with Sons of the Fallen right there. And you can see the results of that are plain to see. Lots and lots of dead horses clad in that gold barding that Rune are known for. Sons of the Fallen still trying to hold back the horde of the attackers, but slowly but surely. There's a lot of AP in the attacking armies as well, which is definitely the right call. Southrons, the Mountain Orcs in there. Got some Baltroth Trison which have managed to sort of swamp over the line as well. Obviously not the best in melee, but at least they're out of ammunition from a Dwarven perspective. They're also going to be able to surround some units, pulling out those little karambit knives they use. Sons of the Fallen still resolutely holding the front line. They are AP as well, I believe, the Sons of the Fallen. Starting to take some losses now, though, and it's from the heavy Goblin Crossbowmen, which is absolutely the last thing that the Dwarven defenders wanted to see, but a very good attack, honestly, by the attackers here. They opened up as many gaps in the wall as they could, and they attacked through all of them, stretching the defences as much as they possibly could. And while I've been a bit critical of the defenders, I have to praise the attackers here as well, because they've absolutely handled this in the way that you should. Of course, it's easier when you have a lot of disposable lives to throw into the front line as well, as the evil factions tend to have. A bit of arrow fire going on there as well. I would hope that's from Orc Hunters, which it is. They need to save their crossbow ammunition desperately here. The defenders, I would suggest. The Blacklock Engineers will be an extremely important unit going forwards, I think. While the Obsidian Guard are on the front line, as much as I praised the sight of them earlier on, they haven't really been used all that efficiently at all. They've been thrown to the meat grinder, really. And seeing as we're seeing this replay from the perspective of one of the Khazad-dûm players, I don't think we're going to be able to see how well they actually did in this hideous situation. Come the results screen. Forward comes some Serpent Guard. They, of course, will have an updated unit model in 0.97. Oh boy. Let's zoom back out while that's happening. I really don't want the game to crash at this point, but that was the Blacklock Engineers scything through the dismounted Serpent Guard. I mean, the body piercing will go through quite a lot of units here, but I can't help but feel like at this point, just a decent shot by the Blacklock Engineers isn't going to be enough. Nothing short of perfection is going to be required from the Erebor crossbows. There's the Isengard Ballista as well, which has already been very useful. There's only 6 men left in the crew, however, as they push their way through the front line there. But the forces of evil are now inside Erebor. So at the very least, this is a siege of multiple layers and defences. Not just one that's all about the main gate. Certainly a good performance so far from the attackers. The heavy goblin crossbows are also starting to shoot in here as well now, which honestly is the sign that the dwarves need to pull back. You know, they can't afford to get involved in a skirmish fight with the attackers anymore. They need their skirmishers to do the heavy lifting in melee for the melee engagement at this point. Like, they need to get their Blacklock Engineers out of here. If they lose the Blacklock Engineers in a cheap way like this, I'd be very confident in saying that the battle is already over. Because the Blacklocks are such a potent unit. I would even go as far to say that if the Blacklock Engineers waste their ammunition, well, they aren't, which is good to see, but if the Blacklock Engineers were to waste their ammunition in a skirmish fight, the battle might be over. They're that important at this point to the defenders. They were always going to be a very key part of the defence, but with how badly the initial attack went, I mean, it does say that they're only a little bit behind, but you know, the defenders need to be substantially ahead at this point in the battle, usually when they're outnumbered in a siege like this, because the battle tends to turn on the defenders when they're outnumbered. This though is a little bit, I would say that, oh dear, yeah, they need to stop dawdling here, the dwarves. Because that Isengard Ballista, with only 6 men left in it, going to be able to get some kills on these units which have just sort of been left here. The Inas Rim trying to stop the retreat, which is probably the only use for a unit of cavalry in a settlement like this. But they're going to get caught up on Ironfoot spears, and yeah, they rout immediately. A valiant attempt by the runic cavalrymen, but ultimately they're going to be destroyed. But this is a situation the dwarves can salvage, I think. Purely because of this defensive position here. If they need to get these units out of here, they need to stop hanging around in full view of the Isengard Ballista. They need to get their spears. They're so densely packed together. The Ballista could kill that unit in one shot if it gets some good accuracy. But they need to get their infantry behind these 2 walls, force the attackers to move through here, and then get their skirmishers over here, because then, in order to get in range of the dwarven crossbows, the skirmishers would have to come in over here, which would put them in range, well, would put them at the mercy of the dwarven infantry. So if the dwarves can sort of organise themselves, which admittedly they haven't really done a fantastic job of so far in this fight. And again, I think I'm more critical in a siege battle like this, because like, you don't have to, things aren't happening as quickly as they are in a field battle. Like a field battle, it's much more understandable when mistakes get made, just because you really don't have the time to react sometimes, and you know, also army composition in particular when you're on a field battle can really be the death of you if you're not careful. Whereas in a siege like this, there's much less excuse. You have much more time. You know, you can see clearly what the enemy are doing. So I'm a little bit harsher on people when they mess up in sieges, I think. Can the defenders come back from this? Yes. If they can organise themselves better than they have done thus far, and also because, of course, the dwarves are fantastic in this sort of situation anyway. The attackers, again, like the dwarves, they're sticking out a little bit. The Uruk-hai crossbows are here, like, just retreat your men a little bit further around the corner. Force the crossbows to come right inside, at the mercy of the infantry. Although that's not ideal, I think maybe that they're just shooting through the wall, which is a map issue, more so than a player issue. If there is sort of wall exploits like that, I do feel as though it's kind of on the players to be a little bit more sporting and not utilise them. Obviously it is easier said than done when you're playing in a battle like this, like sometimes you just don't notice, but I do feel as though if you do notice, there is a sort of unspoken obligation to not use the exploit. Here come the 2nd Legion though, so we are now into the 2nd phase of this fight, which will be longer than the first, substantially longer. So you can see that the Uruk-hai crossbows are here. Again, the dwarves charged forward and then sort of hesitated a little bit, which is weird, although that's more of a pathfinding issue than a player issue. But the 2nd Legion coming in here, and the Snaga Stalkers are going to get absolutely like torn through by the dwarven infantry. Some 3rd Legion over here as well. You can see the evidence of the Isengard Ballista doing its grisly work. 2nd Legion outside, of course, the Snaga Stalkers immediately routing in the face of the heavy dwarven axeman. Would come the goblin infantry as well, so a bit of a game of cat and mouse here, but it's one that the dwarves at this point need to play. I mean, the attackers have certainly earned the right to engage in this sort of warfare at this point. If they can bleed away more of the dwarven manpower, victory will surely be theirs. Yeah, and this is exactly what I'm talking about. If you have your skirmishers over on that side of the, not chasm, but of the halls. Then you're pretty much out of range of all the attacking skirmishers, and you have free reign to shoot into the attacks as they move forward. And Mountain Orc Berserkers will absolutely be a good target for archers to go after. They have next to no armour at all. And also they are a decent threat in melee to Dwarven infantry. Meanwhile, in come the heavy goblins at this point, so the dwarves are engaging in this defence in the way that I would have done, although I think that side is much lighter on manpower than this side, so if the attackers are wise, they will just send forward a token force to hold this force in place and then send most of their force down this way. It won't be easy, of course. Sons of the Fallen and First Legion are standing in the way. But again, I mean, sending forward just a single unit of Ironfoot Spears is another unit which the attackers are going to be able to just isolate and overwhelm. They really should have just waited for the reinforcements to come forward as well. And I am quite aware of the fact at this point, actually, that most of the wasteful behaviour has actually been on the part of Erebor so far, unfortunately for the Erebor player. I don't mean to call him out, but it has to be said. Meanwhile, there's a lot of blood sprays going up, which suggests the Blacklock Engineers. Don't quite know where they are, though. There's also the Isengard crossbows getting into position, but they're immediately getting assaulted as well. Axe throwers trying to kill them off, but this is not the worst thing in the world for the attackers, honestly. A very depleted unit of crossbows is absorbing Dwarven axe thrower ammunition, which is one of the deadlier tools at their disposal in this sort of engagement, so the attacking infantry is free to engage in a vacuum with the Dwarven infantry, which is still not the easiest engagement, of course, but it's much easier than it would be if they were also having to weather that storm of axes being thrown at them. Forward come the Sons of the Fallen as well. There's also the Mithril Guard over there, which was hidden amongst the Dwarven ranks, trying to just sort of slowly poke and prod their way through the manpower, which is the only hope of the dwarves, really, that eventually their quality shines through and the attackers start to run out of steam. But I still haven't seen any of the runic infantry come forward yet. None of the Loki units anyway, so I would imagine that the Golden Boys are still around here somewhere. Indeed, the Flagrim and the Gamprim. There's still Serpent Guard, there's still Nazkai. Certainly not the easiest engagement for the attackers here, but they can afford to be pleased with what they've done so far. Khazad Reclaimers pulling out their axes and closing down into the melee engagement as well. Sons of the Fallen and Ironfoot Spears pushing back the attackers, so that is something the attackers could fall prey to. The fact that, you know, they are sending forward their weaker units, which, without any sort of quality on the front line, the dwarves will eat them for breakfast. Like, Sons of the Fallen are such a good unit for that because they're so resilient, and also the armour piercing they have on their spears, and for spears they have high stats as well, so they're going to be able to mulch their way through lower tier units. Forward comes another unit of Eastron Clansmen with the armour upgrade, but that's really going to be of no concern to the Dwarven infantry. More meat for the grinder. Heavy Goblin crossbows trying to sort of shoot over the heads of their own men. Not the best shot for them, but they are still managing to land a few hits, and the attackers can afford to be a little bit more this way inclined with their skirmish ammunition. They can afford, you know, there's less dwarves to kill, so any kills their crossbow gets going to be very, very good. There goes the catapult from the Misty Mountains, getting a grazing hit at best into the Orc Hunters. The Erebor Legionaries are back there as well, but I mean, with all those units in loose, I mean, I don't think the dwarves are going to be too worried about that. The Isengard Ballista, those kills may very well add up. Meanwhile, the guards of Khazad are on the front line as well, so 3 hit points now engaging on the front. But one problem actually that the dwarves are having here, you can see the pikes are in place. Uruk-hai pikemen, they may be very, very heavily depleted at this point, but you can see that they are managing to push the dwarven line back a little bit. The phalanx is down, the Southron pikes are in there as well, adding to this. So some range support I think is needed, or a unit of First Legion pikes, because they will just, especially the Southron pikes, the First Legion pikes will absolutely dominate them. But with how depleted the Uruk-hai pikes are as well, not so great for them. I mean, the numbers are going to be the issue here, but it does go to show, you know, when pikes get into position, even really, really scary infantry can struggle to make an impression on them quickly. A little bit thin on this side of the line as well, the Second Legion. If the attackers really wanted to, they could maybe push through here, and that would be disastrous for them. Again, Death Eater needs to be... There's only one engagement happening here, so Death Eater needs to be very much keeping an eye on that. And if they do try and make a play, commit forward a unit of 3rd Legion to stop that. But you can see how well the Sons of the Fallen and the Guards of Khazad-dûm have done here. They really are pushing the attackers back. Some dismounted Serpent Guard on the front line. You can also see the Barrow-wights are starting to join in as well, which the Barrow-wights will be very difficult to get rid of quickly. Impossible to get rid of quickly. But the rest of the attacking force is definitely struggling a little bit here against the Dwarven infantry. Crossbow bolts and javelins still being thrown into the Dwarven line, however, which over a long engagement is likely to have a very detrimental impact on the longevity of this front line. There are more reinforcements to come forward, of course, but they are at the mercy a little bit of the attacking skirmishes here. The attacking infantry, however, certainly needs to hold back the dwarves for as long as it can, and the dwarves are turning them back. We are at about the halfway point, to be fair, as well, and they have now pulled ahead in the percentages, which is good to see. There is hope yet for the dwarves, and we are at near enough half percentage on each army as well, so halfway through the battle in pretty much every sense, as this great archway in the halls of Erebor plays host to the latest stage of this battle. Ironfoot spears in there as well. A lot of spearmen, actually. There go the Barrow-wights. They're really starting to go all over the place. It's a very interesting glitch, this, and I can only assume it's because of their very low mass that they start going crazy like this. It's not great for the dwarves, but it's maybe not the worst thing either, because it does mean that if they glitch their way through the line, individual models can then be isolated and dealt with in a vacuum a little bit more. Also, it does split the unit up a little bit. If the Barrow-wights are in a big block, it's very, very difficult to hack and slash your way through them, whereas individually, a little bit less scary. So we'll see. And there you can see that another one of the Barrow-wights just glitching through the line and getting killed immediately. So yeah, I would say this is actually playing in the dwarves' favour at the moment. It's a rather unique thing you have to take into account with the Barrow-wights, and I would assume it is the low mass that does this. I can't imagine it being anything else, because I can't imagine there's anything else that's different about them other than their speed and hit points when you compare them to a unit of standard infantry, at least in terms of the code they use. Regardless, looking at this front line, there are some Mahout units, there's some Serpent Guard in there, some basic Eastrons. Really, the Serpent Guard are the best thing that's on the front line at the moment, and they are a decent infantry unit on the front line, but they're certainly not up to the same level as the Dwarven infantry that they're facing off against here. And still the dwarves continue to push back the attackers. The catapult has just been flinging over a few boulders to the other side. Uruk-hai crossbows trying to get what kills they can, and they are getting some hits here, but again, this is not ideal for crossbows. Javelins will have slightly more luck hitting their mark from this sort of angle. But still, any sort of armour-piercing damage they can pour into this front line at this point will be worth it. Catapult, again missing. Very difficult hits to try and make here for the Misty Mountains catapult, but attempting it. Nothing wrong with that. Some Angmar units on the front line now as well. Angmar halberds, preparing their halberds as well, getting into phalanx. Again, that's the sort of thing which 1st Legion are going to absolutely butcher. You can start to see now that the Dwarven manpower is starting to run low on the front line. So those javelins and crossbows definitely having the desired effect for the attackers. More bolts. Heavy Goblin crossmen have pulled out their blades at this point. Obviously terrible in melee, but at this point just flinging forward any old garbage. And also the close proximity of the Cave Troll drummers buffing the morale of their nearby troops. Just ensuring they don't run and rout, which is a problem for the dwarves, because rousing the enemy would be a very viable tactic, if not for the close proximity of those drummers. Still doing okay though in terms of the percentages. Guardians of Khazad-dûm getting towards the front line as well. Their focus on armour won't help them too much in this sort of engagement though. The dwarves have got access to a lot of armour piercing. Still, the Guardians of Khazad-dûm will at least be better than the Eastrons that have been thrown to the wolves so far, and they're still pushing the enemy back actually, to be fair, the dwarves. I mean, as soon as they get too far into this side of the hall, they will just be overwhelmed and crushed. This is where they want to stay if they can help it. You can also see actually that some of the Eastrons are starting to try and filter around the Dwarven units. Is it worthwhile to maybe try and commit forward a few more units at this point? I don't really know. I'll be interested to see how the Dwarves decide to handle this going forward, because they have managed to fight their way back onto sort of a more even playing field than they were after the front gate fell. That looks like a serious unit indeed. The Nazkai are going to try and push their way to the front line, which will be a real problem for the Dwarves. The Nazkai are very well suited to fighting Dwarven units just because of their very high AP. They're also multiple HP themselves as well, so they won't go down easily. They and the Uruk-hai Berserkers together would be a very potent dwarf killing combination. Heavy Goblin Crossbowmen trying to filter their way through the lines as well, but they will undoubtedly be hacked to bits on the way through. Yeah, you can see the front line is starting to buckle a little bit now. And with the addition of the Nazkai on the front line, I can't imagine that this Dwarven resistance is going to be put up for much longer. I don't know. I mean, the Demons of the Desert are still loitering with intent as well. Reinforcements extending all the way back down there. Yeah, you can see even all the way across there, actually, towards the front gate, there are still attackers as well. But, I mean, it's not an unending army for the attackers, but let's not forget they still haven't committed forward any of their Trollmen units yet. We still have yet to see the Witch Realm Hammer Guard. A lot of strong units yet to be committed, whereas the Dwarves have had to commit forward an awful lot of their stronger units already. Blacklock Engineers do still have a lot of their ammunition left though. Only a couple of volleys were loosed earlier on, so if they can be used to their fullest potential, who knows? The attackers have been using a lot of their ammunition as well, so maybe as this fight goes on, the Erebor crossbows will have free rein to shoot into the attackers, which that could be exactly what the defenders need. Still, this front line holds though, which I'm actually surprised at. I would have thought that the addition of the Nazkai and a bit of a push on both flanks would have been enough to start to bring about the end of this Dwarven resistance, but I was wrong. They're actually still pushing the enemy back over here. The Sons of the Fallen just going beast mode. There's only 24 of them left, and now they're up against Barrow Wights and Guardians of Khan Dûm, as well as even more Eastrons. You would imagine that this is going to be the end of it for them, but they managed to push their way all the way to the enemy siege equipment, which is a very impressive feat indeed. So the Dwarves definitely proving why their infantry is the envy of Middle-earth in this engagement here. They may not have had the best of times on the front gate, but here, much better. Much, much better. Just 18 Ironfoot Spears. They're actually starting to waver as well. It takes a lot to make the Dwarves waver. You can see here they are starting to pull back a little bit now. They're trying to save what they can, as now the Blackwatch Legion comes forward, finally overwhelming this Dwarven front line. And that's going to open the floodgates a little bit. The attackers will then be able to pour into the second chamber within Erebor. Again, I keep referring to the settlement as Erebor. I can only assume. Still a few axemen in there. Still a few dwarves. Trying to kill off that banner carrier there. Blackwatch Legion, of course, not the best in sustained melee, but at the very least they can break up this Dwarven front line. Pushing through. Still a few axemen in there as well, only 6 of them. 7 guards of Khazad-dûm remaining as well, but no, the Dwarves did well in that engagement. They're going to need to do even more if they want to actually go on to win this battle. But that was a good start. Erebor Legionaries also marching into place. So more reinforcements have actually made their way over. Just sort of trying to block the attackers on their way forward. Maybe try and set up a huge blob over here so that the Blacklock Engineers and all of the Dwarven range units can take full advantage of that. Ripping through their manpower. Erebor Legionaries, of course, again, one of the finest units of line infantry in the game, outside of sort of like General's bodyguards with multiple HP. Erebor Legionaries can certainly count themselves up among units like the Imladris Guardians or the Castamir's Legion. Very expensive though, of course, like you really do pay for a unit like this to field them on the front line. Ironfoot crossbowmen just in behind this front line over here, which is now actually being tested by Angmar halberds, but there's actually 2 more units of guards of Khazad-dûm there, which goes to show how many elite units that the dwarves had available to them. Oh, excuse me. Ironfoot crossbows firing in. Here comes the Dragon's Wrath crossbows though. They actually have a fantastic shot there. I mean, only one of them shot their payload there, but they scythed through the 3rd Legion and the 1st Legion. Now, though, is when the Orc Hunters of Khazad-dûm are going to start to open up on the attackers as they move through. I mean, Haradrim Archers are not the finest prize. Those are Blacklock Engineer bolts, though. But they're being shot up into the air. They really need a straight shot so they can just shoot right through the enemy. Demons of the Desert are fighting. There's still a dwarf in the middle of all of that mess. You can see him there, one of the Sons of the Fallen. He's about to get ripped to pieces, though. Eastron Clansmen started to test this line as well, which is not going to go too well for them. Mithril Guard, 1st Legion Pikes, Arable Legionaries, all very high quality units. Militia, absolutely not going to bust through them. Flagrim perhaps on the way forward as well. More crossbow bolts, including the Blacklock Engineers, pouring in to the attackers. The Demons of the Desert are in here, which absolutely will be a fantastic target to go after. If they can kill them off, that's a real worry that the defenders rather, have managed to deal with. Meanwhile, Haradrim Archers going up against the Dwarven infantry line. That is most certainly going to only end one way. But they're moving forward at least with the Barrow-wights. And when you're out of ammunition, every man needs to take up a melee weapon for the cause. The Haradrim units have also got new unit models in .97, of course, as I'm sure many of you have already seen. Which is definitely a good thing, because I think, you know, the basic Haradrim units, as they have been ever since vanilla, really, it's just like, it looks like they're just wearing their sort of around town robes, you know? Doesn't look like they're off to battle. Well, still a single unit of 3rd Legion there. Or a single man from the unit of 3rd Legion. And he's surely not going to last too much longer. Those are halberdiers after all. That is armour piercing that is going to be thrown his way. Meanwhile, Arable Legionaries, of course, they swallowed the Eastron unit whole. Flagrim will be able to put up a much better fight, however. Their AP, they should still lose to the Arable Legionaries, especially if they're being backed up by the 1st Legion, but at the very least, the heart and soul of any runic army should be able to withstand this a little bit better. Meanwhile, here come the Demons of the Desert once again, as well as the Uruk-hai crossbows, which will be a real worry for the defenders, as it has been throughout this battle already. Ooh, the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen as well. They, of course, have got their sort of Nafatoon-esque explosives. Pulling back the Flagrim, so I think what they're going to try and do is utilise their ranged units to try and kill this unit off, and they're actually blocking the way with a unit of very depleted Snaga. Will they be able to set up and fire quickly enough, would be my question. Barrow-wights are still here. This side, however, the Haradrim Archers, of course, were killed off extremely quickly. But now we have Orc Fellers on the front line, as well as Angmar halberds. Immediately, bolts are flying in. I mean, a big, beefy volley from the Demons of the Desert into this Dwarven blob. That's the sort of thing which can make the fight, can put the fight out of the Dwarven player's reach. Yeah, that was a volley which went mostly into the pillar, it looked like. It wasn't a full volley. This is going to be a full volley, though. The Dwarves need to... They can't afford to walk into melee. The time for walking is over. There's the catapult as well. I mean, the Dwarves have essentially been forced forwards into an engagement here, which is not the worst thing for them, honestly. I think the attackers are maybe a little bit underprepared to deal with 1st Legion and Mithril Guard. Demons of the Desert and Guardians of Kharn-Dûm, as good as they are. Again, the Dwarves going to have the edge in melee there. Let's see if the Misty Mountains catapult again. If the Misty Mountains catapult gets a good volley as well. Did they get a good volley? Oh, they did. That's a tragedy for the Dwarves as well. That's a lot of friendly fire they just got, though, and that's going to rout a lot of their men. But that is the danger, and again, I can't help but feel as though the defenders brought that upon themselves. Like, a catapult is not a fast-moving thing. It's a very obvious thing to see as well. Catapult getting into position, pointing right at one of your most powerful units, slowly cranking back the arm. If you don't move it, it's your own fault. So once again, the defenders have made a rod for their own back, really, by just not paying attention. Dragon's Wrath Guildsman on the front line as well. Very skillful unit. Their stats overall, as one person points out, are actually better than the Carmel's Chosen. But they do not have multiple HP. And they don't have a shield, which are very significant defensive advantages the Carmel's Chosen has. Which essentially it just means that if you see the Dragon's Wrath Guildsman, you shoot them. There are the Meteor Guard. I mean, that was the danger of bringing forward the Misty Mounts Catapult in this way. They're now just going to get absolutely butchered by the Meteor Guard. First Legion Pikes holding back this horde. There's some Black Uruks in there. The upgraded Serpent Guard are coming forward now as well. The Erebor Legionaries on the front line. Ironfoot Crossbowmen are shooting as well. Orc Hunters moving forward. I don't know, with that range support, the Dwarves may very well be able to hold here for even longer. Blacklock Engineers are moving forward. They may very well be out of ammunition. They do make very good infantry as well, just because they're multiple HP, however. So a good makeshift unit. This, however, is a problem. The attackers are still being aggressive, and the Blackwatch Legion should be able to split this First Legion pike line in half, but the First Legion pikes, it looked like they were going to try and run away there. That is a terrible mistake to make, because you're already in melee. There's no escape at this point. You might as well keep your unit pointed in the right direction. Because if you try and run away, you're just going to get stabbed in the back and you're going to get killed off so quickly. That caused the First Legion to waver as well. So a poor mistake again. I mean, these little mistakes are going to really add up, I think, for the defenders. I really don't see how this many sort of misplays can be made in a 5v3 and for the 3 to go on to win. And they do still have a lot of... There is another... We have here essentially the King's Hall, the town centre. Another Legion bodyguard, but this is a very paltry force back here. Very stretched, the defenders, I must say. There's several gates, I suppose. There's a lot of Mithril Guard as well. I mean, I guess that is one thing that I'm not really taking into account, the fact that they have a huge amount of elite units still left, the Dwarves, but it's an interesting thing to rely on. Still holding the line, still a unit of Mithril Guard here. Trying to hold back the attacks as they continue to move forward. So, I mean, yeah, but based on how many elite units they have left, I suppose the Dwarves could still be counted as the favourites in this fight. We shall see as things continue to progress. Trolls of Gundabad moving forward. Still a decent force over here. The Guards of Khazad-dûm, the First Legion Pikes and Ironfoot Crossbows that are out of ammunition being committed forward as well. Forward come more Runic Cavalrymen. Trying to just sort of add their mass, maybe panic the defenders a little bit. But here we can see the attacks are moving across. Ironfoot Crossbowmen are going to shoot into the attackers as they move forward as well. Last samurai style. However, the attackers, unflinching, are going to continue to charge forwards. Dragon's Wrath Guildsman leading the way. The Ironfoot Crossbows are going to be forced into a retreat, however. No final volley for them. There is a unit of 4th Legion and Erebor Legionaries as well. Trolls are also going to march forward. The Cavalry, also here. What's left of the defenders here? I mean, there's a few Mithril Guard left, but at this point being overwhelmed through sheer numbers. Upgraded Serpent Guard trying to finish them off. Forward come the Troll Drummers as well, just to make sure there's no breakage. And there are the Erebor Legionaries as well. I mean, this is still a decent front line. There's still enough pikes here that the attackers need to take this engagement, I think, a little bit more seriously, because they are actually being forced back once again. Demons of the Desert would be exactly what the Doctor ordered for the attackers here. They could just scythe through this defence. Blacklock Engineers, First Legion, Guards of Khazad-dûm, Erebor Legionaries, all good targets to kill. It says defeat seems certain, although I would imagine that comes from... Let's see here. Yeah, there's some crossbows back here as well. Demons of the Desert. a very potent tool the attackers have at their disposal, which I think honestly they need to use. They're bleeding manpower slowly but surely here. And I didn't realise actually that the dwarves had that amount of elite units still left in the back halls. The dwarves are going to continue to try and retreat to the back halls though. Unit of 45 guards of Khazad also moving back there. Some orc hunters. As the gates are open. Still, just shy of 20,000 frames left to go in this battle. And I would imagine that the next large-scale engagement will probably decide everything. Either the dwarves will lose too many of their elites to continue, or the attackers will simply run out of steam. In Asarim already shaken. That is a problem the runic cavalry has had. They haven't really had the opportunity to be really effective. But I mean, this is their time. If the Rim are going to be useful at all, it will be now. They can charge into those Ironfoot crossbows. They can try and charge into the 4th Legion Shield Guard, I suppose. That probably won't go too well for them. I think they're going to. No. They need to make up their mind quickly here, because the window for them being useful is closing. Here we go. That was a poor charge, though. They just sort of walked into melee there. You need to give an attack order. And that has all the hallmarks of someone not giving an attack order and just running them into melee. Definitely not the way you want to use your shock cavalry. They could really be charging into the back of these Erebor legionaries as well. I mean, again, I'm much less forgiving of this sort of thing in a siege battle, because it's not as if you're having to do multiple things at once here, really. Like, your skirmishes are in position, your infantry is holding them in place. Recharge them. It's a unit of lancers. Armour-piercing charge. And again, you will win this engagement regardless, but you need to win all the engagement you can as efficiently as you possibly can at this point. You still have several units of Mithril Guard, Dragon Slayers, Varad Mithrin, Sons of Durin. All of these units you still have to cut your way through. You need as many men as you possibly can for the front line. Over here though, finally, with the addition of some Trollmen and some more range support, finally looks as though the Dwarven resistance over in this little platform is finally going to be ended. Victory seems certain. Blackback Mountain Berserkers are also on the front line. I didn't notice that. Of course, they're a unit which can hide. Another unit which can do very nicely against the dwarves with their very attack-focused mindset in melee. It's a large amount of attackers as well, so they do still have manpower, the attackers, certainly. A lot of it. Can the defenders, can all of those elite dwarven infantry hold out against all of this? Let's not forget that the attackers still have a few elites as well. I mean, the Trollmen, the Champions of Nafarat, Demons of the Desert, Blackback Berserkers, the Hammer Guard, the Witchram Hammer Guard is still around here somewhere. What have we got here? Where am I? Aha. Snaga skirmishers out of ammunition. Rolling forward. Looks like the Rim did charge in then. Some of them do have their lances out and charging into the Ironfoot crossbows. There are some Axe Guard of Erebor in there, however, and each swing from them will probably cause the death of another runic cataphract. It's a rather interesting, almost looks like the crystal caves from Dark Souls 1. Up in the roof of that mountain. Still, Uruk-hai crossbows, Snaga skirmishers moving forward, just trying their best to be as efficient as possible at dealing with the dwarves. These are walls as well, so these could technically be knocked down, but I'm not sure. I mean, the Misty Mountains catapult was almost certainly swallowed whole by the Mithril Guard, and the Isengard Ballista has almost certainly used up all of its ammo at this point, so this will be just a single choke point the attacks will have to force their way through. That's exactly the sort of engagement that the dwarves will like as well. Another nice charge from the Rim, finally being used for their intended purpose, killing off these Ironfoot crossbowmen as quickly and efficiently as they are possibly able. Meanwhile, some routing Ironfoot crossbows there, some dead 4th Legion. The attackers are starting to make their way around here as well. I don't think there's any way down here, this is just for flavour. The forging pits. Let's see here. Right, so we can't actually get into that engagement as closely as I'd like from this side, but the Black Uruks of the Mountains, the first ones into the breach. And they're being blocked by the Orc Hunters of Khazad. The Orc Hunters, of course, pulling out dual axes in melee. Certainly no pushovers in melee, but by the same token, certainly not the strongest dwarven unit that is remaining. A lot of dwarven infantry over here, which is very, very strong. However, very nicely laid out, actually, this dwarven force. Very neat looking formation as 4 units of 4th Legion Shield Guard with the armour upgrade start to close in on the front line. In formation as well, so it's going to be even more difficult to push through them. And also some depleted Axe Guard of Erebor also going to be committed to the front line. Ethereal Guard, of course, armour piercing. Very, very deadly. And of course a second unit of Blacklock Engineers, which could be so devastating. They're pushing their way around here, the Black Uruks of the mountains, but they're going to need more than this, the attackers, to make it through this gate. The layered gatehouses of the dwarves here certainly tough to push all the way through. The attackers still have some tricks up their sleeve, I'm sure. The Demons of the Desert probably going to be a very key unit for the attackers moving forward if they are to have success in this fight. It's a massive interior to this settlement as well, I must say, and this is with the maximum amount of players as well, 8 players. And even still, the armies feel dwarfed within Erebor's mighty halls. Orcans of Khazad doing a good job on the front line in tandem with the Axe Guard of Erebor. There's a few trolls running around in the background there. Still, I think the attackers are eager to utilise their ranged units, but it's going to be so difficult. I mean, look at what they've got to work with. A tiny gap. I think the dwarves have very much learnt their lesson at this point. You know, don't let the attackers have an easy time of it with their ranged units. Victory seems certain. Yeah, again, this is a unit of Black Uruks, which has essentially been thrown under the bus, actually. I mean, again, not all of this like gatehouse here, I think, is hollow. Only the walls are solid, which does mean it's not quite as narrow as you would think, and it's the Uruk High crossbows trying to go after the Axe Guard of Erebor that are in behind the lines. Certainly a good choice. The Axe Guard of Erebor on the front lines, meanwhile, they've been joined by the 4th Legion Shield Guard at this point, which is going to mean that the attackers, they're going to need to commit forward more than this. Like, they can't afford to keep engaging in this manner, because if they do, the dwarves will just be able to wear them down. They need to come forward in force. They need the Blackwatch Legion to push their way through the lines, and they need to make it not a choke point fight, but spread out all throughout these halls. Give their javelins and crossbows the opportunities they need to shoot into the enemy units they want to. And that's how they will win this fight. 4th Legion Shield Guard are here. Some Angmar Halberds moving in as well, but I don't know if Angmar Halberds are really going to be the answer. I mean, phalanx formation, they can force the dwarves back a little bit. Armour piercing. But as far as halberdiers go, they are of low quality, of course. Defeat seems certain as well. Oh, excuse me. Ah. So they are going to be able to force their way through. Did that Misty Mountains catapult actually survive? It did, look at that. Only 2 of them survived. And very lucky for the attackers indeed, because it means that they're going to be able to smash their way through the walls, and it won't just be about a single choke point. So we have almost what's going to be a bit of a rerun of the front gate, albeit narrower. More challenging for the attackers to get through, especially with the calibre of dwarven units they're going to have to fight. But I would imagine we're probably not going to see the final layer. I'd imagine that everything is probably going to be decided upon here in this 3rd chamber of the dwarven settlement. There's Isengard crossbows still trying to get some good hits. Snaga skirmishes getting ready as well, perhaps to try and throw some javelins as soon as the wall is down. And maybe the barrow wipes, the trolls. A lot of nasty units the attackers can still call upon, but I'm not sure whether they have the overall quality that is going to be needed to kill off all of those dwarven units. They still have those runic crossbows as well, to be fair, though. The attackers, I think, are going to have to try and make it more about ranged than anything else if they're going to win this, because just from a pure quality standpoint, yeah, the dwarves are still outnumbered, but the quality they have on display is still very, very large. They're giving the attackers too much leeway here, though. So there was a little bit of a cut there as my recording software decided that it would not record, so I had to actually take a little bit of a gap between recording sessions, which does perhaps suggest that my GPU is undergoing a few problems, but hopefully that isn't the case, because the GPU is something that I can scarcely afford to replace at this current moment in time, and it is very integral to how I record things. So regardless, we will continue and we will hope that those problems do not rear their ugly heads again, as the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are in a perfect position to throw their payloads into the heart of the advance of the Orc forces here. As you can see, the Trolls are going to push their way through as well. The Barrow-wights and the Guards of Orthanc taking the vanguard there, as the other section of war also falls by the wayside. Still, the Trolls lurk in the background, but a combination of the Barrow-wights and the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers are something which the attackers will truly despise going up against. But they have managed to push their Trolls into position. There's only 4 of them left. And honestly, in melee, the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers can certainly look after themselves, especially against very depleted Trolls like this. There is one that seems to just be going off all on his lonesome. They're trying to get into the Blacklock Engineers, but even the Blacklock Engineers are a very capable melee unit as well. Multiple HP, they may not have the same offensive capabilities the Reclaimers do in melee, but they should certainly be enough to deal with very depleted Trolls, and especially if they receive some support from the Axe Guard of Erebor. Meanwhile, the Dwarves have sort of backed off a little bit. They're just allowing the attacking forces of Orcs and Evil Men to blob themselves up a little bit, and I can certainly see what they're aiming for here. They're hoping that the Axe Throwers and the Crossbows can do a lot of the heavy lifting for them. The Uruk-hai Crossbows have forced their way into position. The Catapult, of course, is still very much a fixture in this battle at this point. There's only 2 of them, but there isn't really a way that the defensive Dwarves can actually get to that Catapult. Meanwhile, we do have the 4th Legion Shield Guard blocking the advance of what's left of the Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen. The Dragon's Wrath Guildsmen are very skillful, of course, but in the numbers they're currently in, they will be overwhelmed. They're going to need the support of the Angmar Halberds and the Trollmen of Harad that are following them in. But the Dwarves are going to be committing forward some more men now. The Khazad-dûm Reclaimers going to throw their payloads into the advancing forces. That's a huge column of Halberdiers that's advancing into position. The Mithril Guard adding themselves to the defence, as of course are the 2 1st Legion pikes that are in here. Meanwhile, the meat hitting the roof of Erebor's Arch there. Blacklock Engineers, the Trolls of course are all dead at this point, and now the Orcs and Evil Men are bottled up, which is exactly where the Blacklock Engineers and the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers will want to see them. The Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin joining the Mithril Guard. I believe they're both AP units that have shields. I believe they're the equivalent of one another in both factions, and of course both incredibly powerful Dwarven heavy infantry. And this is where the problems for the attackers are going to lie now. They're sort of bottled up into an engagement against the most elite Dwarven infantry that there is, and this is what is going to decide the battle. We're still just over 10k frames in, but there you can see just bombarding the position of the Blacklock Engineers. It's not the best shot, but neither is it the worst one, because they are still going to be able to puncture multiple units in that fashion. The Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, of course, now finding themselves the target of the Eastron Crossbowmen, which again, the attackers do still have their own ranged units. The Demons of the Desert in particular could be very, very devastating if they get into the right position, and the Dwarven line is ultimately still kind of stretched, but the calibre of Dwarven troops that are on the front line here, it's going to require the best that the attackers can muster to get through this. The Mithril Guard, a couple of units of Mithril Guard, Dragon Slayers, 1st Legion Pikes, one of the best pikes in the game, all sewed together by 4th Legion Shield Guard and Axe Guard of Erebor. It's a very nice bunch of units they have, and another unit of Guards of Khazad-dûm actually that I missed, although having said that, getting bound up in a fight with the Goblin King's bodyguard, of course this is still a fight the Guards of Khazad-dûm will comfortably win. There's actually some Back Mountain Berserkers over here as well though, so the Steward of Dale utilising his most elite Misty Mountains infantry units to try and single out the Guards of Khazad-dûm. We shall see if he has any sort of success here. I mean, the problem they have is just the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers and the Blacklock Engineers are in such a good position, and the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers in particular are just going to be able to tee off into the back of the Back Mountain Berserkers. The stink cloud of the rotting meat in the background there. There goes the Isengard General in and amongst the runic position there. Guardians of Khan Doom also moving forward. There's also the Halberds now. The Gamprim, in the numbers they're in actually, the Gamprim, I don't know, there's still a lot of 1st Legion. The 1st Legion Pikes will be able to outrange any Halberdiers on the front line. The Gamprim would be super useful in this situation. if they had impunity with the range of their weapon, but the 1st Legion pikes, with the numbers they're in on the front line, is going to make that somewhat difficult for the runic forces. Those Blacklock Engineers still doing a ton of damage, but the Eastron crossbowmen responding in kind to the guards of Khazad-dûm here. And with how the Blackback Mountain Berserkers were killed by the Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, the guards of Khazad-dûm themselves are now going to be able to finish off Azog and his Goblin King's bodyguard. Most unfortunate here for the attackers, because I do believe at this point actually that the attackers, this is as far as they go. I think it's going to be very difficult, because this is exactly where the dwarves are at their most potent. You know, you could argue that they use their elite infantry as a bit of a crutch, but every faction has something they rely on a little bit more, and this is what the dwarves rely on. 4th Legion Shield Guard, there are the Trollmen of Harad on the front line, but I don't think they're in enough numbers now. The Loke Flagrim, or Loka Flagrim, are another unit which, technically speaking, could be pretty efficient in this situation, but at this point it's just a matter of sheer power that the dwarves are bringing to bear. There's still the odd Blacklock Engineer shot coming down, almost mortar-esque, which is something that Khazad-dûm will actually have in the next patch. They have a sort of unit of mortar-like. It's similar. It's something which you have to sort of see to explain, and I'm sure with .97 right around the corner we'll be seeing it sooner rather than later.
Only half the enemy force remains.
Kamul's Shadow Guard are also on the front line, but they too are just being stopped dead in their tracks by the potency of this dwarven front line, and I do believe Erebor will remain in dwarven hands at the end of the day. I mean, over here the line is looking a little bit thinner, and there are champions of Nafrat on the front line which are very, very strong. Shock troop. Here comes the runic cavalry trying to push their way through, and there isn't actually many spears on the front line. There is enough that should be able to stop those cavalrymen though. There goes Azog. Dead at last. Forward come the Hammer Guard, so the attackers are definitely focusing on this side. Blacklock Engineers, who still have ammunition by the looks of things, but looks as though they are just going to be committed to melee. Not sure what the thinking behind that would be. Some more Javelin men in the background, some Snaga skirmishers, but at this point I don't think it's going to be enough. I mean, at this point, the attackers may be pretty strong over here, but on the other fronts they're not doing quite so well. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers still throwing away. Still a few runic cataphracts in and amongst the melee there. It's just Mithril Guard, Dragon Slayers of Ered Mithrin, Guards of Khazad-dûm. Under normal circumstances, champions of Nafrat and Witchram Hammer Guard together would be an overwhelming force. They're actually pulling off this front line at this point though. What are the dwarves doing? Are they going to use the final layer? They still have troops in the final layer after all. They are going to retreat. I can only assume this is a desire to see the final layer of the settlement, because if they had just held their ground, I think that this battle would have been won. So if they go on to lose this battle, this will be why. And with runic cavalry still available, they could run down the dwarves as they try to retreat. Still a few dwarves being left behind as a sort of rearguard action, tussling with the more elite Easterlings and the more terrible orcs from the Witch King's realm. Blacklock Engineers are going to retreat. Still some Khazad-dûm Reclaimers firing away. Yeah, this is the problem. I mean, the Lokinus Room are going to make retreat pretty difficult, honestly. Having a look at the percentage of kills, they are ahead. The attackers only have 8% of their army remaining. The defenders have 15. I think the defenders should still be fine. I mean, they're going back in now. Very bizarre tactics being used here by the defenders. The Demons of the Desert have now managed to slip past as well, which, with their devastating firepower, things could get pretty messy. The Cave Troll Drummers at this point engaging in melee. They kind of have to. One of the few powerhouse units the attackers have left. Maybe they were just trying to draw the enemy skirmishers in and then go back in to kill them in melee. It was a risky move if that was the case though, because that could have gone wrong. I mean, I think just based on the amount of elite units they have left, the dwarves will be fine regardless. Eastron crossbows are in melee now though, which needless to say, their abilities in melee are less than stellar. Khazad-dûm Reclaimers, I keep going to refer to them as Guards of Khazad-dûm because of the unit model. They're going to come into the side of this big infantry blob, utilising those big dwarven axes. Axes with one head, that is peak aesthetic. Double-headed axes, however, absolutely terrible. Worse looking weapons. Best looking weapons though are axes with a single head. Yeah, I don't know, I mean, they are getting somewhat overwhelmed in places, the dwarves here. The 1st Legion Pike's getting swamped a little bit by a bunch of armor-piercing units.
Only half our force remains.
But we can see that Eclipse 2500, if half of his troops are still left, that's half a Khazad-dûm army, which the attackers are going to have to somehow cut their way through, and I just don't think they have it in them. Oh my. I mean, those are the Dragon's Wrath crossbows that are... They're going to be able to get through this layer, I think, the attackers, just about, but the final layer will prove a little bit too much for them, I think. Dragon's Wrath crossbows are also a little bit uncontrollable. When you fire them into a blob like that, you're probably going to get a bunch of friendly fire, which is not good for the attackers either. And there's still Mithril Guard over here, and 1st Legion Pikes giving the attackers the business. Forward come the Dismounted Serpent Guard with a ram. Going to try and knock their way through into the final layer of the settlement.
Our ally lies dead. Slain.
There goes one of the 2 Barlins, at the hands of a champion of Nafarat though, so certainly not an unworthy opponent to fall to. Here come the Dragon's Wrath crossbows, and they are in the most ideal spot here. I mean, they're less friendly fire they're going to get from shooting in here. They're going to kill Mithril Guard and 1st Legion from shooting in here as well. This is also a unit which causes a huge amount of morale damage, which is honestly the most impressive thing about it.
Cut the cowards down.
One of the attacking armies is gone. It's not Angmar, it must be the Misty Mountains. So despite starting at the back of the settlement, as is customary, the Misty Mountains were used as the sacrificial lambs by the attackers. It's certainly what the goblins are best at, after all. Yeah, a bit of a mess here. I mean, I feel as though at this point the attackers can probably see the writing on the wall, and it's just a matter of trying to kill as many of the defending dwarves as they can. But certainly a very, very shifting fortunes with each layer. The main gate went very well for the attackers. The 2nd layer, the defenders were able to pull it back a little bit. Here, the 3rd layer, they've managed to continue that trend, and the attackers have just run out of manpower as the fight has gone on. In come the champions of Nafarat. This should be more than enough to deal with a very depleted unit of 4th Legion Shield Guard. There's still a pretty hefty amount of Mithril Guard to deal with though. And the attackers can't really assault the final layer until they're finished down here. There's a couple of Sons of Durin still left alive as well. That's actually the Harad General that's going toe-to-toe with this banner carrier as well. It would be a true tragedy if he was to fall. Still fighting hard here, the Shield Guard, but against all of this armor piercing. That's probably going to be the end of them. What have we got here? Some Snaga skirmishes. Not the heroes the attackers really need at this point in the battle. 1st Legion Pikes. Mithril Guard still fighting hard.
We have lost control of the city.
Dragon's Wrath crossbows pulling out their large waved swords as well, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're waving off a lot of their troops here, the attackers, but you can see here, yeah, this is probably for the best. I mean, there's no sense in drawing this fight out any longer. The defenders are going to spring forth from the final stand. I mean, to be fair, it's only Legion units mostly. There is Legion Bodyguard and Highborns of Erebor also. There's some Ironfoot crossbows in there as well, but it's not like an overwhelming force that's here. Technically speaking, you could view the Mithril Guard as being the strongest unit that's left, and I mean, it could be that in the defenders' design, I mean, there are demons of the desert, but I just can't see. I just don't think they have the melee power to pull this out, the evil factions, at this point. It's close though, very close battle, within 10%, which is very good for a fight that's got 8 armies involved with it, as I say, especially a 5v3, which usually pulls very heavily in favour of the attackers towards the end of a fight. And there we can see the Mithril Guard being given a taste of the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. What have we got going on back here? A few little alcoves as the dwarves make their way into position. Of course, speed is maybe not the dwarves' strong suit. Ered Luin, when they get added, will be a little bit more mobile than their brethren from Khazad-dûm and Erebor, but as it stands, the more heavily armoured dwarven factions move a little bit more slowly in their heavy dwarven plate. Meanwhile, Demons of the Desert are going to be scything through that big dwarven blob, but I think even they will have their work cut out for them to try and turn this fight around. Pretty strong in melee, of course, though, as well. There's also the mighty Witcher Arm Hammer Guard, but yeah, the attacks at this point just don't have enough of a melee presence left. You can see that even over here, in just trying to finish off the Mithril Guard, they've taken even more casualties. Here come the Legion Bodyguard, 2nd Legion, a couple of units of 2nd Legion Axe Guard with them, so a nice aggressive force here that's going to try and finish off what the attackers have over here. I suppose it's not completely out of the question that they turn this around if the Demons of the Desert are used to their fullest potential. 4 Ironfoot crossbowmen. Some Highborns of Erebor as well. I mean, the Dwarves don't really have any ranged units left, so I mean, the Demons of the Desert are technically free to just sort of run around the pillars and get into a nice position to fire, but I don't know. It's a little bit too far gone at this point, I think. Snaga skirmishes. Going to get a point-blank volley, but not very decisive there. Some Uruk-hai crossbows engaging with the Legion Bodyguard, but that's only going to go in one direction.
Victory will be ours.
Indeed. There's only one faction here that's going to achieve victory. Witchrealm Hammer Guard coming in here to try and deal with the 2nd Legion Axe Guard, but with the advance of the Dwarves from the other side, can't imagine this is going to go too well for them. Flag Rim trying to form up, but there's only so much they're going to be able to do against Dwarven units of higher quality. I mean, the Demons of the Desert charging in, they must be out of ammunition, otherwise they would be trying to use their ranged prowess, but they're charging into 1st Legion pikes, which is probably the worst engagement for them, because the 1st Legion can hold them at arm's length, whereas everything else would have to get into melee with them, and the Demons of the Desert do have a pretty savage melee attack. Yeah, the Dragon's Wrath crossbows still have a bit of ammo left. I would imagine that's probably Isengard. They only had crossbows and Snaga left. Indeed it is. Witchrealm Hammer Guard going up against the 2nd Legion. Across come the Legion Bodyguard now, though. And yeah, I mean, this Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen, the last faint hope that the attackers had. They still had a bit of ammo, but now they're going to be chased by the Legion Bodyguard. There goes the Harad General. Killed by one of the Dwarven Axemen. Down here, the Highborns of Erebor fighting alongside the 2nd Legion. The Flag Rim, the only thing that are standing in their way at this point. Still some Angmar Halberds just out here in the middle of nowhere. Dragon's Wrath crossmen trying to run away. I mean, they will be able to outrun the Dwarves, but they won't be able to get into a position where they can turn around and fire quickly. Witchrealm Hammer Guard, I mean, they should win this fight, the Witchrealm Hammer Guard. They managed to isolate some 2nd Legion, and they are of higher quality, even as depleted as they are. Got a couple of Halberds in there helping them out as well. But elsewhere, the Dwarves will be able to comfortably win. They still have the Highborns, they still have the Legion Bodyguard, 2 very, very high tier units, as well as some Legionnaires as well. Or Legionaries, I should say. Legionnaires is a form of disease, isn't it? Meanwhile, again, you can see this is the problem with the Dragon's Wrath crossbows. They never seem to get like a full volley where all of them fire all at once and devastate a unit. That was only a couple of crossbowmen that fired there. If the whole unit fired, they could have devastated that Legion Bodyguard actually, but as it is, same old for the Dragon's Wrath crossbowmen. And now they're having to go into melee with the Legion Bodyguard, and that's going to be the end of them, you would suggest. Well, there goes the Runic General. Killed very early in that engagement. 1st Legion pikes killing off what's left of the Demons of the Desert. That unit of Angmar Halberds brushed aside by the Highborns. The Legion Bodyguard, of course, again, they can inspire nearby units around them. But that isn't particularly important at this point in the battle. The Dwarves can see that victory is upon them, a costly victory, but Erebor remains out of the hands of Sauron's minions. And now at this point the Witchrealm Hammer Guard, they will certainly give a good accounting of themselves before they fall. They would have killed that unit of 2nd Legion if they had been left to their own devices, but now with the Highborns and with more 2nd Legion on the scene, that fight is most certainly going to turn in the opposite direction. Dragon's Wrath crossbows, of course, powerful in melee as well, let's not forget. But completely outmatched here. When it comes to heavy infantry, Khazad-dûm are most certainly the best in .96, and coming to the end of .96 now. So Khazad-dûm will not be able to enjoy their... They're not grossly overpowered, but they are certainly stronger than they should be. Their infantry is so good. And of course things will be retooled to bring them more into line with what is expected in 0.97, but here we can see the Witcher Arm Hammer Guard, the final stand. I think they did actually manage to kill off those 2nd Legion, but now they're having to go up against another unit of 2nd Legion and the Highborns. 1-to-1, if both units were fully healthy, the Witcher Arm Hammer Guard would probably win that just because of their more offensive focus and armour piercing. There's actually still a Barrow Wight in here as well. Just a single Barrow Wight, and there is the General, of course. Forward come the 1st Legion Pikes and the Legion Bodyguard. Close battle though, within 5% it was in the end. 4% to be exact, so a very close battle on a map which is very interesting. It seems like the sort of map that I would have seen before. I don't think this was made by anyone in the Reforged team. It might have been. But just the fact that there's like missing textures indicates to me that it was kind of a map which was in the game files which was never finished. I don't know. Still, interesting nonetheless, and I do think this version of Erebor is far superior to the version of Erebor that was in vanilla 3rd Age, which was not a particularly great settlement to defend. I don't think people really thought that one through when they made the defenders have to take consistently the lower ground in the engagement. Regardless, here we are. The Angmar General is the only soldier left, and yet it will be 96% of the defenders killed, 100% of the attackers killed, 4% difference. Not many men left, honestly. I mean, you have about just over 100 dwarves. And there we go. A good fight, even in spite of the rather strange difficulties I had recording. I really hope that my GPU is not on the way out, because that's not really the sort of thing I can afford to replace at this point. And if it does go bang, that would completely negate my ability to make videos. I hope it doesn't come to that, I really do. Hopefully it's just NVIDIA and the GeForce experience being glitchy, which is certainly not completely out of the question. But of course, Khazad-dûm, Erebor all getting a decent amount of kills, with Death Eater getting just the most. And then the attackers, Harad getting the most, but I think that's understandable because they certainly committed a lot of their forces in the initial engagement at the front gate, which went the best for the attackers. It went consistently worse for them the further they got into Erebor, the attackers. But early on, Harad certainly did a good job. Harad and Isengard were the ones that seemed to take the lead on that, and they did very well. Later on, I can certainly see the appeal of doing that as well, saving Rune and Angmar for later on in particular with their sort of stronger infantry, their AP infantry. But in the end, the dwarves were just too much for them. So let's see what did the damage for the Khazad-dûm factions. Eclipse, the one who sent me the replay, the Mithril Guard, of course, absolutely beast moding it on the front line. As for the 2nd Legion Axe Guard, actually, they did even better. 443 kills was a ton of kills, and they were the MVPs for Eclipse's army, so very well done to them. So as much as I was saying maybe the elites for the dwarves were what was the crutch for them, turns out some of the more basic units were that as well. The Hammers of Gundabad also giving a good accounting of themselves. As for Death Eater, his army, he got more kills overall, but none of his units managed to break 400. We got a unit 309 for the Sentries of Khazad-dûm, so basic pikes getting the most as well. So as much as those initial engagements seem to go in favour of the attackers, a lot of their troops also falling by the wayside. Of course, we can't see Erebor, so unfortunately we can't see how well stuff like the Blacklock Engineers did, but I'm sure that it was a good amount of kills, a hearty amount of kills. But yeah, so big thank you to Eclipse for sending this one to me. So we are, of course, very much coming to the end of 0.96's life cycle now, so it's good to see these sort of more unique fights to really give the patch, which has been with us for quite some time, a good send-off. As for what's coming up, I do have another Dwarven Focus Siege on Moria, actually, which is on 0.96, which may very well be the last battle of 0.96 I show, just because I do want to split up the Dwarven Focus Sieges a little bit if I can. But I am told on good authority that it is a very good one, so it might be honestly the best send-off for 0.96 that we can give. There's also a few more 0.96 fights, might be a couple of 0.97 previews as well, we shall see. Again, it all depends whether or not my recording software continues to hold itself together. But yes, I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you will join me for whatever is next.